Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game preview for Boise State versus Utah State. The 3-1 Boise State Broncos, who reached number 21 in the AP poll this week, take on the 1-3 Utah State Aggies. Boise State is coming off of a massive win, and I think that because of how big the final score was, how big the win was, we maybe don't appreciate what a performance that was by Boise State, what that win meant. That was a good Washington State team. That was one of the best teams to visit the Blue in recent years, right up there as far as relevance goes, importance of this matchup with the Oklahoma State game from 2021. This was an huge game for Boise State, and they lived up to the moment, and they destroyed them 45-24. And now they have a chance to turn around and continue to build on that momentum with a Utah State team that has not done what they wanted to this year. A lot of things going on for Utah State. Lost their head coach, lost their athletic director over the offseason. That whole program is in chaos, and it showed on the field. They've also had some injuries at the quarterback position that has impacted them as well. So this is a Utah State team that is struggling coming into this matchup, and it opens up an opportunity for Boise State to follow up a big win, something they haven't always done in the past, follow up a big win with another dominant performance and continue to set themselves on that path to the CFP. Can they get there today? Can they get to that, or not today, but can they get there this week? Can they set that tone with another dominant performance in this game? We're going to preview this matchup. We're going to watch this game. A little sneak peek here. It's not on a channel that it should be. It should be on a much bigger one, but it's not. We'll talk about the betting odds. We'll talk about the series history between these two teams. There's a lot of it, actually. We'll talk about key players, both Boise State and Utah State. If there's any Utah State fans watching, not just this video, but just still watching at the season in general after the start so far, there's stuff in here for you as well. So and I'll need your help correcting my name pronunciations in the comments below. And then keys to the game for Boise State, a summary of this matchup, and a score prediction. And of course, everybody's favorite part, the score predictions time. Now, I do have one little wrinkle, little change to how I am doing the score prediction shout-out contest this year. I have noticed that with the current policies, which is first score prediction down, that is the closest to the final score, is the one that I shout out, and I only shout out one. I've noticed a couple of things happen from that. One, I'm noticing a lot of people not actually putting the score prediction they believe because they're going through the comments or they're seeing what other people are putting down, and then they're making their own score predictions so that it's different, so they have a chance of being shouted out, which kind of defeats the entire purpose, because the entire purpose of this is I want to hear your honest predictions, your takes. This is your chance for me to have, or our chance to have, that discussion about this game. And if you're not actually putting down a prediction you truly believe in, it defeats the whole purpose of me being able to come and have that fan interaction and discuss the game with you. So the other element also is that there's been a couple times last week where two people, minutes away, put down a score prediction, the same score prediction, and they were both right, only able to shout out one with the old guidelines. So I'm going to change it up this week. Anybody who gets the right score prediction, I will shout you out in the game review, like I've been doing all the rest of them, but anybody that does it. So if it's one person, if it's 10 people, anybody that gets the right score prediction, I will shout out. Now, if it is a closest to, I'm not going to put like the top 3 people that were all generally close. I'm going to pick one person, unless there's multiple people with the exact same score prediction on that were closest to, if nobody gets it exactly right. So whoever gets the score predictions right this week, I will put them in the review video, and I will add one little element here. I will still continue to pin to the top of the comment section whoever commented the right score prediction first. So everybody will get shouted out who gets it right, but only the person who commented first with the right score prediction will get pinned in the comment section after the game for that for their game preview. So hopefully that motivates everybody to go in and put their honest takes. That's what I want to hear. Also, any thoughts you have on the game, you can always come back after the end of the video and add any kind of takes or discussion points you have against what I've said in my preview as well. So I want to hear all of those. So that's the policy going forward. Get those score predictions in. Let me know when you're ready to come back. All right, cool. We're going to continue with the rest of the video here. So Boise State versus Utah State this Saturday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time on FS2. There are no other college football games on FS2 during Boise State's time slot. I think Indiana, I don't remember Rutgers. Rutgers versus somebody is playing at like 2:30, but that game will be over by the time Boise State game starts, and that's nobody nobody else on FS1. There's nobody else in Boise State's time block. Now, there might be some other, baseball or horse wrestling or some other fake sports playing at the same time, but it doesn't matter. Football is the sport that matters, and Boise State should be able to be on FS1 here, and they're not. They're on FS2. It's a completely disgusting what Fox Sports is doing with this Boise State program. They have no respect at all for the Boise State Broncos. Last week, Boise State versus Washington State, 2 CFP contenders, and Washington State was a CFP contender. I fully expect them to go undefeated the rest of the year from this way out. Could still potentially, maybe, have a chance, though their season as far as that outlook is probably gone as far as getting that large bit. But 2 CFP contenders. Fox, not only did they put them on FS1 instead of putting them on the big Fox channel, they didn't even send their broadcasters to the game. They watched from a satellite location. They have no respect for Boise State. They have no respect for the Ashton Jeanty Heisman campaign and what he's doing and what the level of player that he is, a historic player. They don't care. They're not promoting him. They're not putting him on their main channels. Whoever gets the next TV deal with the Pac-12, I hope that Fox Sports does not come within 100 miles of it. They have been an absolute embarrassment to the broadcasting world, and I hope that they never touch a Boise State game after 2026. So this game, FS2, but at least it's being broadcasted, and hopefully we get to see the first 5 minutes, which we didn't get to for the previous 2. The first game, obviously, for Boise State. So FS2, Boise State favored by 27 points, given a 96.6% chance of winning. And you know what? That actually seems accurate now. There's been a lot of times in the past when Boise State's gotten these huge Vegas odds, 20 plus, and most of the time they haven't lived up to that. But now we're seeing a Boise State team that is consistently putting up 40 plus points a game, and the defense is rising up at the moment that it's needed most. After a first game performance that we were very shocked by that. I don't think that we expected to see that, and we thought, well, okay, I guess this is just going to be one of those shootout years where you have to outscore them. Boise State's defense has turned things around. That's a big talking point for the season. We're going to talk about it in this game. Obviously, was a huge factor to Boise State's win yesterday versus Washington State. So 27-point favorite, honestly, that now seems realistic, something within Boise State's grasp. Can they get there? Well, there's a lot of serious history between these two teams. They've had some big wins, but most of the time throughout, there's been some really close matchups in this Boise State-Utah State series. Utah State actually won the first game in 1975, and that one was a bit of a blowout, 19-42. Boise State then won the next 2 before Utah State was able to win in 83. Then Boise State won in 95. Utah State then took the next 2 games, and then things got into Boise State's courts. From 98 to 2014, Boise State did not lose another Utah State game until 2015. 2015 was a disappointing year for a lot of reasons for Boise State, but that Utah State game, very, very memorable. Lost 26-52. Now, Utah State did have a future first rounder at quarterback, but that was a very disappointing game for Boise State. And then the last 8 games leading up until 2023, Boise State has won every single one of them. Boise State won that game dominantly, 45-10. And this looks like it could be headed that way. And a big reason that it could be headed for another type of blowout, not just because of Washington State's 1-3 start compared to Boise State's 3-1, but because of Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty is one of the best players in college football history. Certainly the best player in the country this season, but one of the best ever in the college football game. 82 carries for 845 yards. I saw a stat on Twitter today that said that Ashton Jeanty's yards after contact alone, which was like 500 something, yards after contact alone would actually have him 6th overall for total yards rushing in the nation. That's just his yards after contact. 845 yards rushing, 10.3 yard average, 13 touchdowns and a long of 77. Ashton Jeanty is an unstoppable force, but it's not just him on this offense. I know that he is the heart and soul and core of this offense, and he's a big reason that we have had the offensive production score-wise that Boise State's had so far. 13 touchdowns is insane. That's 13 touchdowns is what a lot of players won't even get to on an entire season, even if they're primary starter at running back or wide receiver. And Ashton Jeanty's got to that in Game 4. And as a reminder, he only played the first half versus Portland State. So for Ashton Jeanty, he's done this on 3.5 games. 3.5 games, he's had two 200-plus yard rushing performances. He was 2 yards short, like 198, 197, 2 or 3 yards short versus Oregon of a 200-yard performance. And then Portland State, they pulled him out when he had 150 plus. I think it was 153, something like that. If he'd continued in that game, that was just first half, it'd been 300 yards, but obviously saving his health. So Ashton Jeanty, he's the face of this program. But there's been some other players stepping up on offense recently, kind of quiet under the radar because of how big Ashton Jeanty is. But Matt Lauder had a lot of talk going into the season. There was a lot of hype. There was a lot of videos coming out of spring and fall ball. Should have done the way spring and fall ball, talking about his potential, could be one of the best receiving tight ends for Boise State in recent history. A lot of that coming out of fall camp, and we didn't see that much of him the first 2 games, but the last 2 games, he has come into his own. 187 yards receiving, 2 back-to-back 90-plus yard games in the last 2 matchups for a total of 210 yards on the season, including 3 touchdowns. And last week, Ashton Jeanty, tackle breaking machine, breaking 6 tackles for a 60-plus yard touchdown run, breaking another 6 or so tackles for a 10-yard-ish run for a touchdown. I mean, he was all over the place, couldn't be stopped. Matt Lauder had his own little mini Ashton Jeanty moment, broke a couple of tackles, sprinted to the outside on an underneath crossing route, sprinted to the outside, got into the end zone for a very, very impressive touchdown, especially for a tight end. He can block, he can catch. He's a key player on this Boise State offense, and especially as we're looking for elements of the passing game to step up, to not just be a trade-off from the running game or a break from the running game, but truly to step into their own and be able to even carry this team on some drives. A player that is stepping up as a key target for Maddox Madsen and could potentially be a key to unlocking that next level of the passing game is Matt Lauder, and I think that he could have a big game versus Utah State. And then safety here, Ty Benefield. I met him after the game. I said, I don't know why I have a tendency to throw S's into a lot of people's names, but he corrected me. It's Benefield, not Benisfield. But anyhow, Ty Benefield, 29 tackles, 1 interception. He had 8 tackles versus Washington State. And if you rewatch that game, it is a dominant performance by Ty Benefield in that matchup. He is really coming into his own in this season. We saw some really exciting flashes from him last year. Really, really exciting player as a freshman. But this year, he is a key player on this defense, and I think he started to unlock that next level potential of himself in last week's matchup. He had that interception, which by the way is the only interception on the year for Boise State defense, had an interception to stop a Washington State drive right at the end of the half. They were at the 24. They could at least have gotten a field goal, probably had a chance to push down for a touchdown, stopped them. Huge momentum shift for Boise State. To start the second half, he comes down and makes a huge play on the wide receiver coming out of the backfield. In the flat route, huge play. There was a lot of times where the Washington State wide receivers would get away from the first tackle, but not against Benefield. Incredible first tackle there. And then incredible stop in the open field. And then he comes down against Mateer, right there at the line of scrimmage, fights through a blocker and forces a 4th down attempt, which they converted, but just the tackling performance by Ty Benefield in this one was incredible. I mean, he had some amazing open field stops. He had 2 tackles that stopped guaranteed touchdowns, 100%. Now, one of those first drive, stop against Mateer on the run, they did end up scoring afterwards on that drive, took them a couple more plays. They did end up scoring. But the other one, they were forced to punt, and the wide receiver is running free and open. Benefield tracks him down and makes the tackle and stops a Washington State touchdown. Would have been a big momentum shift. I think that would have tied the game at that point. So Benefield has stepped up in a big way, and I think that he's a player that you could build the team around. You look at 2021, right? J.L. Skinner from that safety position, a secondary that was having some issues, but J.L. Skinner really stepped up and created that strong presence that the team felt. The interceptions, the tackling performance, all of that was built around that J.L. Skinner energy that he brought to the field. Benefield, I think, can bring that similar level. I've been excited about him since he stepped foot on campus, and I was very, very excited about him in my preseason preview for the defense that I did with J.L. Skinner and Hunter White. So I think that he is a player that is just starting to come into his own. Huge game versus Washington State, and I expect him to continue that level, that rise versus Utah State here in the rest of the season. Now, Utah State, They have been struggling. They definitely have struggled a bit here on offense and as a team overall. But they do have some players here that, if given the right circumstances, can definitely challenge you. Spencer Petraeus, I might be mispronouncing his name slightly there. It's either Petraeus, it's Petras. I know that I think I'm actually saying that name wrong, but we're just going to push with it. Petraeus sounds cooler anyway. So Spencer Petraeus, 5,637 yards in his career, because he was the quarterback at Iowa, played there for a very long time. This is his 6th season playing overall. 36 so far completions out of 59 on the year for 438 yards. He was injured in the second quarter versus Robert Morris, their FCS team that they played. And so he didn't play until last week versus Temple. So he's coming into this game pretty rusty. I mean, I know he's a 6th-year player, has a lot of experience, has really struggled to play at a high level. No 2,000 plus yard passing seasons, all of those 18, 15, 17, somewhere in that range. Has really struggled to be efficient in the passing game. And so he's coming into this game, even with all that experience, he's still coming into this game rusty, not being able to really fully develop himself, coming up against the biggest game of the year here for Utah State. So again, only 438 yards passing overall. He had 293 of those yards versus Temple. So he did have a pretty strong passing performance versus Temple. But even in that game, 26 out of 44 was something, I think it was a 57% completion percentage. I might be doing the math wrong on that. But it wasn't, again, inconsistency in the passing game. He had some good opportunities. He did throw well overall, but still inconsistent. An interception, 2 touchdowns, but an interception. He's actually thrown 3 picks on the year versus Robert Morris. He had 2 interceptions and a touchdown, which I think demonstrates that level of rust and inconsistency with the offense coming into the season. He just hasn't had that time yet because of the injury to fully work through. And big factor here, big thing to note, is that this is not a running threat. Unlike Mateer, who's probably one of the best running quarterbacks Boise State will face the entire season, even if they get to CFP, one of the best in the nation running-wise. That's not Petraeus. Negative 291 yards rushing on his career. This is a player that if Boise State brings that blitz, Mateer could get out of it. He could scramble. He could go down and get a big, get a touchdown or be able to manage to go down and get a 50-plus yard run. He was capable of that. Spencer's not. Spencer is not. If Boise State can bring that blitz, he's not going to be able to wiggle out in the same way that Mateer was. And Utah State has allowed 8 sacks on the season. Now, Boise State had 8 sacks last week versus Mateer. So this Boise State defensive line is heating up. And this is a Utah State offense that is definitely vulnerable. Mateer himself, I believe that he has been sacked 3 times. But this is a quarterback that can't run very well, has a decent arm, but is not efficient. And a Boise State secondary is definitely going to have some opportunities. Now, when he does go to the air, his primary target is going to be wide receiver Jalen Royals, 25 receptions for 280 yards receiving, 11.2 yard average, and 2 touchdowns. And interesting to note, his 2 best games of the season happened when Petraeus was out there. 10 receptions for 112 yards versus Temple, and 5 receptions for 77 yards versus Robert Morris. The rest of those games was like 40 and 50 yards something receiving. So total on the year, 280, but his best games have come when Spencer was out there passing to him. So they have chemistry. This is his primary target. He's going to look to him a lot. So Boise State's definitely going to want to lock him down. But they do also have a running game. Their running game is under Rashul Faison. I'm really struggling with the names this week. So Utah State fans, get in the comments. Let me know how I'm saying them wrong. Let me know how to say them correctly. But Rashul Faison, 67 rushes for 395 yards, 1 touchdown, 5.9 yard average. He's played really well the last 2 games. Not super strong performance the first 2, but the last 2 games he had 115 yards versus Utah and 148 yards versus Temple. So he's really stepped up the last 2 games. And I know when we look at Ashton Genty's 200 plus, I used to be quite impressed when I saw 100 plus yards rushing from a running back. And now we've watched Ashton Genty and I go, man, he only had 148. Man, it must have been a slow day. And obviously that's not the bigger picture talking there. Obviously that's still impressive, but it's not Ashton Genty. No one's claiming he is, unlike some fan bases. They're not claiming to have their own Ashton Genty, but this is definitely still a capable back that could. Boise State's run defense has been strong, but they did have vulnerabilities versus Oregon. And so, it's only been a couple of games here. The run game with the running back run game is not necessarily a huge part of Washington State's offense. That's primarily the quarterback, which Boise State did a really good job of stopping. Faison here, he's going to test that Boise State run defense, and they're going to have to show whether or not they have really fully stepped up and plugged some of those holes that we saw versus Oregon. Now, for keys to the game for Boise State, the number one key that I have overall here is avoid the post-win letdown. Last week was a massive win. High energy, high confidence coming into this matchup. But that can be a very dangerous position for a team to be. After you not just win a game, but win it in the way that they did, having such a huge second half performance in front of a crowd that brought more energy than I have ever seen to a Boise State game. Very few games in Boise State history compared to that one. It's brought up on Twitter that, 2012 BYU game, the game versus Oregon 2009. I would agree. I think those are similar energy. But as far as a game that I've been able to experience myself, as far as a game we've seen in the last few years here for Boise State, none compare. None truly last decade plus compare to the matchup that we saw versus Washington State. The crowd energy, fourth quarter, and I'm sitting on the sidelines there. It was deafening. You could feel the crowd noise reverberating through your body. So I can't even imagine a player trying to focus on the game plan with all of that coming down. I was just sitting there taking pictures. I can't imagine how to be a player with that energy. It was like 5 total false starts or delay games. They had to use all their timeouts at one point. Pushing into the fourth quarter, game is in hand. We know we're going to win. 6 minutes left. Washington State's on a drive, and the crowd is still bringing that high energy. Everybody's there because they know they're witnessing history. And so when you have that, when you have such a high energy performance and you're so amped up, you can have a little bit of a hangover effect coming into the next game. That's such an adrenaline rush. You can have a bit of a release, and it can be a little harder to get back into and raise that energy level again coming up against a team like Utah State that doesn't bring that same level of excitement. There's a tendency for teams to overlook, and I don't think that Spencer Danielson's teams do that, but there is a tendency out there. And Boise State teams in the past have definitely shown that tendency. That was always kind of the trend. The Harsin years, that was the trend, that we'd have a big win or we'd get into the top 25 and then we'd lose the next one. In 2015, win against UVA, that was huge. Win against Colorado State, break into number 21, and then lose to Utah State. So, break into number 21, game against Utah State. So, the stars aligning there as far as similarities. So Boise's got to overcome that. They have to make sure they don't repeat history there. 2016, Boise State has one of the craziest BYU games I ever got a chance to witness. One of my favorite games in Boise State history, honestly. 28-27, BYU. Boise State wins that game. It's at home. It was a super late game. Crazy, crazy circumstances. One of my favorite. Boise State gets to number 13, and then the next week, lost to Wyoming. And I'm not going to rehash that one, but we all know what happened there. 2017, Boise State wins against Air Force, gets to number 25, loses the next week to Fresno State. 2018, win against Utah State, go to beat number 14 Utah State, huge win on the blue, and then next week lose to Fresno. So this has happened in the past. It's not unheard of, especially again those Harsin era years, for Boise State teams to get that big win, but not Chris Peterson it, not pull it all together and finish the season strong. There has been a lot of years there where Boise State hasn't stepped up the next week and has allowed maybe the energy of the last week to put them in a point confidence-wise that they don't fully appreciate the team they have on the field the next matchup. And so it's good to be confident. It's good to have those high-energy moments, but you have to then reset and realize that you're 0-0 coming into the next week, and this team, just like any team, can certainly beat you. And this might be the toughest test so far for the young head coach, Spencer Danielson. It is easy to get your team focused after a loss. Everybody is kicking themselves. They're rehashing the game in their head. They are looking at ways, okay, I need to make sure I don't do that again. It's easy to refocus the team, fix the mistakes, and move on to energize and motivate them to go get a win. It is a lot harder to focus a team after a win. It is. You can call out and say, we're going to nitpick and look at the things that we can improve, but a team sitting back there going, okay, yeah, I understand. But in the back of their head, they're thinking about that win. They're not thinking about, okay, I really need to focus and emphasize this loss. And I'm talking about generalities again, because I don't think this team does that. I don't think that these players are going to overlook this program. I don't think Spencer Danielson's going to. I believe that these players aim for perfection. And so even if they had a great game or they're thinking about that win, they are going to be buckling down, focusing and saying, I want to do better next time. But again, the tendency, the trends, the generalities are out there, and Boise State needs to overcome those and make sure that they have another dominant performance, because again, it's not about what you did yesterday, it's what you did this week. And if they want to maintain this energy in the polls, they need to continue to dominate each and every team that they play, especially with that group of 5 schedule. Key number 2 for Boise State is Madsen stepping up. He needs to step up in this matchup. I'm not going to say that the fan base is right in their perspective of him, because I don't think they are. I think that they are overly negative, that they ignore the positives that he brings, that they put too much blame at his feet for something that a lot of times is a team effort in these negative performances or down performances. You drop passes by wide receivers that are open. Bad play calling versus Oregon. That second half, fans put a lot of that on Maddox Madsen, but there was some strong defense and there was some bad play calling. The spread 5 was not a good look, and it didn't work, and they kept going back to it. Even last week versus Washington State, 184 yards. It's okay. 2 touchdowns, interception. Then fans are disappointed because of the overall numbers, but you think of that game, there are 2 plays specifically that stand out to me. There's a pass to Austin Bolt that's a 25-ish plus yard pass that he drops. There is a face mask call right after he drops it, but he had the ball in his hands before the face mask. The face mask was after the ball had already been dropped. He should have caught that. That should have been a touchdown. That would have put Maddox Madsen at 200 plus yards passing and 3 touchdowns in that game. And then there's another play to Matt Lauder on a tight end screen. That's an easy throw and pass, and Madsen throws it right to him, and he drops it, and the blockers are out there. That's a 20, 30, 40. I mean, that could have been a touchdown right there. Maddox Madsen maybe finishes the game with 250 or so yards passing, and it's not a perfect performance, but it's another solid one, and right up there with the Georgia Southern game or even the game versus Portland State. And so I'm not saying that he's perfect out there. I know he makes a lot of mistakes. He missed a lot of throws versus Washington State. He did. He missed a throw to Chase Penry to start the game. He missed another throw to Chase Penry in tight coverage, but it could have been better. There were several misses out there by Maddox Madsen, and he's not a perfect quarterback. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he's a top 10 quarterback in school history, because I don't think that he is. But I also think that when you look at Maddox Madsen overall, what he brings to the table, he is doing a much better job than the statistical performance would reflect. One big number for Maddox Madsen, 2 interceptions, 1 sack. There are only 2 other quarterbacks, so 3 total, but only 2 other quarterbacks in the entire country that have 800 or more yards passing that have had a total of 3 or less interceptions and sacks on the season. He is providing a reliable base, not making major mistakes, providing a reliable base for this rushing offense to launch off of. He's not putting them in negative yardage situations. He's not turning the ball over and the offense is having to come back. He's doing it a couple of times, and he has gotten lucky several times. But that's being a quarterback. You throw it up, you make mistakes, and sometimes you get lucky. And if you were to count the near drops or near interceptions of every quarterback out there in college football, I mean, Maddox Madsen's numbers would be somewhat similar to a lot of them. There's a reason that stat is not accounted for by ESPN or anybody else, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. What matters are the plays that are actually made on the field, not the hypothetical what could be's. So I am not saying that Maddox Madsen is having a perfect season, and he's not. But he's also not having the season that a lot of fans think that they're seeing, because they're looking at this from a completely biased perspective. I get called out for being a Maddox Madsen, full supporter, and that bias is clouding my perspective. But again, I would like to remind everybody that that's not the case, that I was not a Maddox Madsen puller for the offseason. I wanted Malachi Nelson. I thought that he would win the job, but I did recognize that Madsen had the potential to win, so I wasn't shocked when he did it. But I wasn't saying that. Even coming into the first 2 or 3 games of the season, I was still saying that I thought Malachi Nelson could win that job on the second half. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think that what Maddox Madsen has done, he's not done anything to lose the games for Boise State. He's not done anything to deserve being pulled. And at this point in the season, he seems to actually start to be developing some stronger chemistry with some of these players that I think is going to pay dividends in the back half. I'd expect him to be your starter all the way up through the CFP at this point. But for Maddox Madsen, he needs to do this for himself. This key is not about the fan base, because at the end of the day, I know, I would hope that he doesn't care. I know the coaches don't care, and I don't care what the fans think about Maddox Madsen, but he needs to build some confidence here. He needs to have a moment where he can overcome these struggles because he has looked off. Compared to this is not the same performance from Maddox Madsen that we saw last year. Last year's Maddox Madsen was very, very confident. He was living up to the moment of the situation, bringing Boise State back with his arm, that being the element that was almost saving Boise State in so many close games. He was throwing the ball with a lot more confidence and throwing the ball with a lot more of a carefree manner. But I don't mean that he was doing it in a carefree, like not caring where the ball went, putting in bad situations, but just throwing with less pressure on him. It seemed mentally just playing much more loose. That is the word I'm trying to go for here versus carefree. Throwing much looser than he is this year. This year, obviously coming off injury and having to get back into it, that's hard. But I also think that he is sensing the pressure on him from not from the coaches. I think they're doing a good job of supporting him, and not from his team because they definitely love him and they're rallying around him. But it's hard to completely shut out all the noise, and I know that he doesn't. I mean, I don't know that, like, I haven't talked to him about this specifically, so I'm not saying that I know that from an inside perspective. But you know that he is not oblivious to the perspective of the fans here. And there's a lot of fans out there that it's not just negativity, they are straight up wanting him to fail. There are a lot of fans in Bronco Nation, and it disappoints me every time I see a comment or a post like this, but there's a lot of fans out there that want him to fail so that they can see Malachi Nelson. They don't want Malachi Nelson to just simply win the job because he's good enough to do that. They want to tear down Maddox Madsen so that Malachi Nelson can rise up. They are looking for him, and not just looking for him or expecting him to fail, but wanting him to fail so that this Maddox Madsen experiment can finally get out of the way and we can see the future of Boise State football. And that attitude from Bronco Nation is completely unacceptable. I don't care who you are. I don't care how long a fan you've been. I don't care what your connections are to the program. If you are thinking like that, if there is ever a moment as a fan that you are looking at a player on the roster and you are inwardly hoping that they don't pan out so the next player that you are excited about can step up, you're not a real fan. You are not a real fan of this program. I'm not saying you have to support everything this school does. I'm not saying you have to support every decision by the coach, and have to say that every player is the best in school history. And I'm not saying that you can't have opinions about who should start and that you can't want somebody else to be the starter. I'm not saying you can't do any of that. And I've definitely had all of those moments on this channel in front of all of you where I've voiced all of those same perspectives at one time or another. I mean, heck, last year I basically halfway through the season started, not just basically, but called for Andy Avalos to be fired. I mean, I was basically the Andy Avalos gets fired channel. So I'm not saying that you can't have a stand, but once the game starts, once the decision has been made, you support whoever is out there. You do not have any kind of thoughts or negative or even a slight positive glimmer when something negative happens because you want to see another player rise up. You support whoever's on the field, and then you can have your perspectives again after the game is over. But I'm at this point I'm done. I'm done with it. I'm done having the conversations. I know Dirk Cutter is. I know that he was not he was very a little feisty, a little fed up with the continued questions about Maddox Madsen. I'm not saying that I'm done having the conversations about Maddox Madsen, but I'm done with anybody in the fan base who is actively out there voicing a perspective that basically implies that they want Maddox Madsen to fail so that they can finally get to see Malachi Nelson. It's completely unacceptable. So this key is not about you. This key is not about the fan base, but this key is for Maddox here. Maddox needs this. He needs that moment that he can step up, that he can rise to the occasion, that we can see what he put on the field last year come to fruition in this matchup, because that's the missing point. It's that confidence piece for him right now. We've seen, again, flashes, moments throughout this year. Beautiful corner pass to outside corner pass to Camper for a touchdown. A beautiful, again, Camper touchdown passes versus Portland State. incredible two back-to-back plays to Camper and Caples versus Georgia Southern after throwing that interception. We've seen the flashes, but I mean, Dirk Cutter said it himself. He's been inconsistent. We haven't seen him bring it all together in one game. This is that moment. This is that opportunity versus a 1-3 Utah State team. Ashton Genty's there to carry the rock behind. And I'm not saying that Boise State should shift their offense to emphasize the passing game. They should keep doing everything that they've been doing, focusing on the run. They're still incorporating the pass, but definitely being a run-first offense. But the moments that Maddox Madsen gets, he needs to take advantage of them. Again, not all the mistakes are his fault. But the great quarterbacks, those that can step up and not just be game managers, but actually step up into the position, are the ones that can take a bad play or a play that's not perfect or defense that's not giving you the exact look and still make it work. Maddox has that potential. We saw it last year. He has that potential. He just hasn't been able to fully unlock it this season. And so Boise State, I'm not saying they should change their game plan. I'm not saying they should run a bunch of short stuff to get him comfortable. He doesn't need that. He's already had the short passes to develop rhythm. Boise State doesn't need to go out there and air it out deep on every throw. He's had deep throws. That's not where he needs to develop that chemistry right now. What Maddox Madsen needs to have the opportunity to do is the mid-range throws. The throws that aren't super hard, that you're having to kind of throw it out on a hope and a prayer, and there's a lot of chemistry elements needed, and not the super short throws that are just easy dump off passes and you're not gaining much from that other than just some slight positive momentum. He needs those mid-range throws where you have to make a decision and he has to throw the ball in a variety of different looks against a defense that may not be completely beat, and find the way to get to work with his receivers to make the play. That's what Maddox Madsen needs to focus on, to work on right now. I think he's doing well with short throws. I think he's thrown some pretty good deep balls and maybe not just had the perfect chemistry all the time. But that mid-range throws, I think, is where we've seen a lot of those incompletions. And this is his opportunity versus Utah State to step up and to settle himself down for the rest of the season, because there's a lot of potential in this passing game. Again, super deep roster of wide receivers, incredible pass catching tight ends. I mean, not just Matt Lauder, but I mean Austin Terry, Matt Wagner. They also have the ability to catch those passes. And Maddox Madsen is doing a good job of managing the game, avoiding the sacks. 1 sack, 2 interceptions. Only 3 total quarterbacks in the entire country with 800 more yards passing that have that number of sacks and interceptions combined. So he's doing a great job of not losing the game here for Boise State. But he has an opportunity here to take the next step forward to being not just a player who doesn't lose the game, but a player who can actually win these games for you. And I think he has that potential that he can step up into. And I know he has that potential because we saw it last season. Everybody forgets about what Maddox Madsen was able to do last season. They focus on a couple of negative moments, or one specific, even the Fresno State game gets brought up a lot. I've talked about that ad nauseum. That's unfairly looked at. The overall perspective of that game is completely flawed by the fan base as well. But we've seen what he can do overall, what he can do last year. He just needs to bring that back into this season. Another element that I think would help is running. Running was a big part of his game. That scrambling ability of Maddox Madsen. We've seen it at times this year. We saw it versus Washington State. The running of Maddox Madsen, it's not like he's Taylor Green. It's not like he's Mateer. He's not a running quarterback, but he's sneaky fast out there, and I think it does help him build that confidence. He gets a good run off. He gets a good yardage score. Maybe even takes a little bit of a hit, and it kind of wakes you up. It kind of wakes Maddox Madsen up, I think, and helps him settle into the game. Builds that confidence. It's a good energy momentum builder. I'm not saying you go get your quarterback killed out there, and obviously he injured himself last year running versus New Mexico. But I think that's an element of his game that's been missing this year. You've seen some small elements of it, but again, it was such a huge part of what he did last year was his running ability, and then showing that fight, that determination, and I think that carried forward into his passing game. That confidence carried forward into his passing game. And so maybe a few designed runs here by Madsen give him that ability to step up into the defense, build that confidence, and show this fan base, but show himself that he can be a strong and reliable part of this offense from a not just a game manager perspective, but from an active participant as well. So key number 1, avoid the post-win letdown. Key number 2, Madsen stepping up. Key number 3, defense complete the picture. Boise State's defense, their pressure defense is one of the best I have seen in recent years, or one of the fact statistically they're one of the best in school history. 20 sacks on the season, 8 last week, 20 overall. To put that into perspective here, 36 sacks last season, which was an improvement from the 3 years previously for Boise State. So 36 sacks last year, I thought that was a good step up. They have 20 in 4 games, and they played a top 10 program in Oregon and a 4-0 Washington State team with a running quarterback. At 20 sacks, Boise State has had seasons where they had 20 or so sacks in the entire year. Now, Boise State's total sacks number for their FBS history, the most sacks in one season, is 48 sacks in 2010. They're almost halfway there in 4 games. I think that record is going down. And a big part of that is the defensive line. The defensive line of Boise State is incredible this year. Last year, it really was mostly just Hassanin. We saw some glimpses, but it really was mostly just Hassanin. This year, so many players have stepped up around him. Version Morgan, Gums, obviously Sheldon Newton. So many players have stepped up around Hassanin, and you can't just double team Hassanin because all these other players are going to beat you as well. It's been an incredible performance for this Boise State defense stepping up this year. And again, 8 sacks versus Washington State, and they have had 34 tackles for loss. 34 tackles for loss in this entire season, 4 games in so far. So 20 sacks, 34 tackles for loss. Again, it's not just the defensive line. The scheme for Boise State, Eric Shenander is doing an amazing job calling this defense, not making the adjustments, making the corrections from Georgia Southern, making the right adjustments, and bringing that pressure. That was really the element that was missing versus Georgia Southern. Identified, corrected, and this Boise State defense post Georgia Southern has not allowed a team to score more than 24 points defensively. Yes, Oregon scored more, but that wasn't on the defense. Has not allowed a team to score more than 24 points since the Georgia Southern game. 45 points game 1, no more than 24 points the last 3 games of the season so far. The element that is missing is the secondary, and that has been a little bit of that story for Boise State the last few years. So it shouldn't surprise fans to hear that. I think the secondary has been doing better with that blitz first defense by Boise State. Has definitely been giving them more opportunities, more mistakes being made by the quarterbacks. Has definitely been taking some pressure off of that secondary, less time for the quarterback to make those throws. But if Boise State could complete the next step up here, complete that picture, not just have the dominant blitz, but win those one-on-ones, because that's the factor. When you go with a blitz, you do end up forcing your defenders, your secondary, your cornerbacks, your safeties into some more one-on-one type battles, and Boise State isn't winning a lot of those. If they can step up to this next level of winning those one-on-ones, combined with this blitz defense, that is the level that would take this Boise State defense to the next step up. That would make them elite, one of the best in the entire country. And you're seeing some of that already. Obviously, I mean, Zion Washington has played great. Alexander Tubin have played great so far to start the year. And I think you've seen McCoy and Banks start to step up. Banks had a really good game. He's stepping up. That transfer from Washington, settling into this defense, and he's getting more and more playing time. And I think he just has earned and deserves to continue to increase his role in this defense. Of course, had that huge sack on 4th and 10. And then, Myron McCoy is a player that was so exciting last year, has had some struggles this season, but he had a really strong game versus Washington State. And I think he's played pretty well so far this year, but really took it to the next level versus Washington State. I think he's a player that's coming on strong here in the second half. And if he can reach his full potential, he could be a player that sets the tone here on defense. But if you talk about a player that is setting the tone, and we talked about him as one of our key players, Ty Bennisfield. If you can build the team here around Ty Bennisfield's performance, if he can continue to reach that maximum potential, this is a Boise State defensive secondary that is so close. I thought that they had the potential coming into this preseason, looking at them as these star players. I really thought they had the potential to be one of the best in the Mountain West. I still think they can. It's like when you look at this Boise State wide receiver room, there's so much potential there to be maybe one of the best in school history. And I'm not saying this Boise State secondary is going to be one of the best in school history, but can be one of the best in the Mountain West this year. They just have to put it all together. They have to build that consistency. They're starting to build into their own. If they can use this game against a quarterback who, again, has been inconsistent. Combine that with a Boise State defense that is coming off one of the best performances in recent years from a blitzing perspective, and they're going to build on that momentum coming into Utah State. You put all that together, this could be that game that the Boise State secondary finally unlocks the mentality, because again, so much of the secondary play is just having that shared mental model, and they're so close, I think, in so many areas to getting there. This could be that moment where they unlock their potential, not just from an individualistic perspective, but from a team perspective. This is that game that would change the course of the season. Already defensively, Boise State's doing a great job, but they could take it to a next level. They could take it to a point where they can go out and face anybody in college football in the Power 5 level, or almost anybody. There's a couple of teams right there at the top, but almost anybody in the Power 4 level, and they could say our defense can beat you if they can start to win those one-on-ones, if the secondary can unlock the same performance potential that we've seen out of this defensive line for Boise State, this defensive front seven for Boise State that we didn't know was possible coming into this year. If they can unlock that, this could be a Boise State defense overall that's one of the best in the entire country. So, summarizing, avoid the post-win letdown, Madsen stepping up, and defense completing the picture. So, summarizing overall for Boise State versus Utah State in this game, this is a Utah State game that is a Utah State team that's in shambles. Lost the coach, AD, the quarterback controversy, and that's not a rare thing to see out of Utah State. It seems to be that way almost every single year recently. Again, Petraeus, rusty, and most importantly, their defense is not good. They have given up 43.7 points per game. That's 128th in the country. There's only like 133, 135 FBS teams. They are one of the worst teams in the entire country for scoring defense. There are opportunities here for this Boise State offense, who's playing in front of a home crowd that just had one of the largest attended games in school history on a game that didn't kick off until 8 p.m. This game, 5 p.m., prime time, perfect time to go to a football game as a Boise State fan. Great for tailgating, great for leading right up into the game. So for Boise State, who knows? This could be the next sellout. It is a sellout already, but this could be the next record-breaking attendance numbers. The momentum, the energy is there. Everybody wants to come out and see Ashton Jeanty, who's the hottest show in town right now. Everybody wants to be part of that. And so this crowd is going to continue to be pumped up and continue to build off that momentum from last week. That is such a tough environment. Again, just sitting on the sidelines, I can't even imagine what it would be like to have to play against this Boise State crowd. That home field advantage is back. Boise State is back. The crowd is back. The home field advantage is back. And Utah State is having to come up and play a team that is in that position. And then fourth quarter, this is a fourth quarter team. That's another element didn't really get to talk about in this video. I want to talk about real quick right now. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but Boise State's a fourth quarter team now. This is a program that has historically not been great in the fourth quarter or the second half, at least under Brian Harsin years again. And I'm not trying to dig on Brian Harsin. I liked what he did with Boise State. I liked him as a coach. I didn't want him to leave. But they had a second half problem. They did. And versus the teams that Boise State has played so far this year under Spencer Danielson, it's a completely different mentality from Boise State teams of the past. Boise State has scored 20 points, 14 points, 14 points, and 21 points in the fourth quarter in their first four games. That is the first time in school history that they have opened their first four games with 14 points or more in 4 straight games consecutively there in the fourth quarter. This is a team under Spencer Danielson that doesn't back down. That is the mentality under Spencer Danielson, that no matter what, they continue to fight and they play like the scoreboard is 0-0 all the way down to the final minute. So this is a Boise State team that has so much momentum riding on them. Their defense is doing such an incredible job. Again, scoring overall defense allowed. Their average overall isn't great because of that first game versus Georgia Southern. But if you take that game away, and if you take away the points that were not allowed by the defense, the special teams allowed 2 touchdowns versus Oregon. If you take those points away, in the last 3 games, Boise State is averaging 20.3 points per game, which is 33rd in the country right now. If you take out those other factors, this Boise State defense is just starting to heat up, and I think they can get even hotter. And then, of course, the Boise State offense is scoring 45 points per game right now. To the 56-point performance versus Georgia Southern, another 56-point performance versus Portland State. I think that we could see that again here. I'm going for my score prediction for Boise State versus Utah State with so much energy riding behind the Broncos and so little energy right now for Utah State. This is a tough place to be. This is a sacrificial lambs moment. I think Boise State has another Heisman level performance out of Ashton Jeanty and another point where Fox kicks themselves for not putting this game on a much bigger, in front of a much bigger audience, because I think that they definitely could benefit from that. This is going to be a Boise State offense that is explosive, and a Boise State defense I think has a big game. My final prediction for this game, 59 Boise State to Utah State 21. 59 to 21. That's my final score prediction. So thanks so much for watching all the way through. Thanks so much for watching this video. Before I end, I did want to really quickly point out, you'll notice I'm wearing my James Ferguson Reynolds shirt. Again, I obviously injured last week. Really hoping and praying that he continues his recovery, is able to come back on the field soon. His dad tweeting out that the foot was not broken, leg not broken. So hopefully that means that he's able to get back to this game soon. However, in the meantime, Taron Shive, the transfer from, and I might be slightly mispronouncing his last name there, but Taron, the transfer from San Jose State, who's taken over, and he has decided to continue James Ferguson Reynolds' Flock Cancer campaign, which is a donation-based program to fight against cancer. And he's continued to contribute to that and continue that campaign. For any kick inside the 20, a monetary donation. And I would really encourage Bronco Nation to step up. This is a great cause. Please, I'm going to put a link to it. I've been putting links to it in all of my videos. I haven't necessarily been pointing it out, but I'm going to put a link to it in this video as well. I really would request that you go and you support James Ferguson Reynolds and Taron in this goal to fight against something that I think almost every single person out there has some family member that's been impacted by this somewhere in their family. I definitely have as well. So please go out there and support Taron and James Ferguson's incredible campaign here. And no matter who's punting out there for Boise State, if it lands inside the 20, there's a donation that's going to be made, and you can be a part of that too, Bronco Nation. So thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. I want to hear your comments in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on this game. Make sure you like, subscribe, and as always, go Big Blue!